Lord once again. I'm a big wig. Yeah. I need to run things up.
Hello and welcome to BIGWIG. BIGWIG is a series that examines the life of lawyers who are not into litigation. Lawyers that have made a name for themselves in the niche area of the law that they have excelled in.
I really think that we are doing a great disservice to young lawyers. Young lawyers struggle with everything, and it's understandable. We all struggle. And some struggle less with litigation than they struggle with corporate work. I think that the profession is so skewed to courtroom. I think we have to overhaul the entire profession.
Playing in my own league, yeah. Can't even notice. Run out the moves, I got this.
Hello and welcome to another episode of BIGWIG. My name is Koye Kekere Ekun. Most people know me as K10. And today we will be joined by a man who in 2013 was named Best Lawyer in Nigeria by World Finance. He is none other than Mr. Ayuli Jemide. And he's going to take us on a journey from where he was to where he is today.
No jokes, please.
Where did you grow up?
Warri.
Okay.
Proudly Warri. I won't trade that for anything.
What was your environment like, and how did that affect your perception of, I guess, the world and how big you can dream?
Well, I think I had the best of both worlds.
Okay.
My father worked for Shell, so we were privileged to grow up in a Shell camp, which was the best place you could have lived in any city in those days. You know, facilities and everything. So I saw that side of life.
Yeah.
You know, living next door on the same street with people from different nationalities, right? And having the privilege to, you know, have those facilities, swimming, playing tennis, and things like that. And I must be honest, you know, it gave me a very good grounding. But then every morning I would go to school in town. And in those days it was a public school, you know, no private schools. So, you know, that gave me an opportunity to hobnob with, you know, everybody. Yeah. And then my father didn't stay in Shell for long. He retired. And we moved to town.
Okay.
Where I then learned how to play football with the street kids in the neighborhood. You know, brushed up my pidgin English significantly. And so it was great. It gave me
best of both worlds.
Best of both worlds. Okay. Best of both worlds. And you know, I learned things from living in Shell camp. I learned skills from living in town, as we called it then. You know, and today it helps me to operate. Yeah,
I'm sure that
in every environment.
That has helped you in negotiations, I'm sure, and all sorts of things. Interesting.
Makes you street smart. If you grow up in Warri, you're street
exactly.
smart.
And we'll get
average Warri person.
So in your growing up or your formative years, was there anybody in particular you looked up to, any role model you had that then kind of determined what you would go on to do?
I would say that I had a love-hate relationship with my dad. You know, I liked many things about him, but then the things I liked about him were the things I hated about him, right? So, he was known to have a very good name. I go to places, even as a child until tomorrow, and people say, well, you know, oh, your dad, if he says A, it's A. If he says B, it's B, right? And if he tells you something, he will keep to his word, and you know, he's firm, and you know, he's frank, he's sincere, and, you know, and so growing up, I liked that, but then the firmness and the frankness and all the things I liked, I had to bear the brunt as you know, as a kid, because if you told a little lie, you really got twerked. You understand?
Yeah.
Yes, and there was no wiggle room.
Yeah.
You know, so I would say my dad.
And in terms of career, what sort of thing? Okay, you said he worked at Shell.
Yes.
Were there any interactions with him or with people that came around him that, I don't know, led you to wanting to become a lawyer or wanting to become a lawyer?
So it's very interesting. My dad is a lawyer.
Aha.
Right? He's a lawyer, but then he practiced for a bit, went into Shell, worked for 10 years, retired, came back, went into politics, then came back to law practice. That may have influenced me subliminally, because having conversations with him, you know, was always logic and reason. You know, there was always the whys, and if you made a point, he was quick to say, okay, that's a fair point.
Okay.
You know, so if you were going to have a conversation with him, you needed to be prepared.
Yeah.
Right? But then as a child, it wasn't as if I thought to myself I would study law. I just stumbled into law because I was not a science student at all. And I thought to myself, well, you know, if you are art and social sciences inclined, you know, the top of the range of courses to study in those days was, you know, aspire to be a lawyer. They take it from there.
And at the time, did you get support from the family when you said you wanted to study law? I imagine at the time, law, accounting, I think medicine were probably the hot tickets too. So
or engineering.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Well, it's an interesting story. I have 3 older siblings who my dad wanted to study law.
Huh.
And they all refused. And he had said to himself, he was not asking anybody to study law anymore, and people should just do what they like. And I didn't know he had had these 3 separate conversations with his 3 older siblings.
Yeah.
I just went to him and said I wanted to study law. So of course he was ecstatic and gave me all the support in the world.
Interesting.
And it's then he told me the story.
Well.
Yes, but at that time I had volunteered to study law, so you know, he wasn't putting me under any pressure.
Okay. Were you one of those people that people would say, oh, I like the way you argue, you will be a good lawyer, or you argue a lot, or you talk a lot, and you'll be a good lawyer? Did that ever happen to you?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I remember aunties and uncles calling me headmaster because I analyzed things, you know, and they just thought, you know, this child, you know, the way you reason is way above your...
So it was more for your analytical mind than being argumentative.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people push people to study law because they argue a lot.
I think a bit of both, but more for the analytical. I was the kind of child who would ask you why, even at that time.
Even though it wasn't encouraged.
No, it wasn't, but I would still ask you why.
So at the time you were called to the Nigerian bar, were you aware that you could be a lawyer without necessarily going to court? Without the litigation aspect of it?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't something that I really dwelled on. Although I was fortunate to have practiced in a firm called GM Co, which is the law firm that was founded by Goody Ibro, and at that time he owned the Sheraton Hotel, you know, and the firm was clear about the litigation practice and the solicitor's practice. Yeah. So the solicitor's practice was in the Sheraton Hotel and the litigation practice was in Abubu Key Street in Lagos Island. So you were drafted into one or the other, and you would support only when there's an exigency. Right. So I was drafted into the Sheraton office, and that was really my first taste of pure corporate and commercial work, which I enjoyed exceedingly. Right, but I still, you know, would go to court once in a while when maybe someone's on leave in the litigation office or something.
Well, that's interesting. So it's possible that if you had been drafted the other way,
it is possible, but then again, later in life, when I started practice, I had my fair share of litigation. And I don't know whether it's because I had that too late or later. I hated it. I hated every minute of it.
Again, similar story. Like it's, you know, you watch movies, series, and there's a theatrical way
Yes.
the courtroom drama,
Yes.
unfolds and
Yes.
stuff. So when I started going to court, I'm like, this
doesn't look like what you saw on
and then
TV.
you go there, you just get adjournments.
Yeah, exactly.
Adjournments,
Yes.
and just
Yes. And the thing I hated most was, lawyers who just come to court to trade the technicalities as opposed to the logic and the law.
Yeah.
I just say, why don't you do your case and stop, delaying the doomsday?
Yeah. You were called to the Nigerian bar in 1988.
Yes.
You had to do a quick.
Yeah.
1988. Time flies. And you started your firm, Detail Commercial Solicitors, in 2005.
Yes.
So can you help us fill in that 17-year gap? What went on in that time? I hear there was Port Harcourt.
I was trying my hands at so many things. Right. So in the early days, I did a bit of law practice. Then after that, I went in-house, and that's how I moved to Port Harcourt.
Okay.
Whilst I was working in the Sheraton, I met a gentleman who had pots of money, owned an oil service company in Port Harcourt, and the oil service companies were booming in those days, and he was into drilling and all that. And one thing led to another, and he says, come work for me in Port Harcourt. I said, Port Harcourt, what happens there? Lagos is where it is. And he left me, and the next time he came into town, he used to stay in the Sheraton. He dialed my extension and said, let's have drinks. So I went, we had a few drinks. And one day he asked me, how much did they pay you? And I said, 500 naira. I said, okay, fine, I'll pay you 3,000.
Okay.
So that's
yeah.
Now you're talking.
Almost a no-brainer.
Right. So I went in-house, and then I was bored in-house. Then I left. Then I started trying to do business. I did everything from furniture making to renovating, to being a shell contractor, to water treatment, filtration, importation. I was just trying things, right? And then my father said, why don't you go back to law? I said, lawyers don't make money. I want to be a businessman. So I was, so I spent those number of years, at least half of it, maybe 7 or 8, trying out things. And then one day I went to visit my dad, and he looked at me and he says, what's the matter with you? I said, what do you mean what's the matter? And he said, look at you, you're looking so haggard, right? Why don't you go back and, start practicing law? You can do all these things on the side, right? I think I had gotten my fair share of, trying to be a businessman, failed at it. And I said, okay, take his advice, right? So I set up a law practice in Port Harcourt, which I ran for a couple of years, maybe 8 years or something like that.
Okay.
And then at some point I was bored. Not bored, I just thought, if I really wanted more out of this profession, I need to step up, and if I wanted to play at the higher echelon, I need to do something about it. And, in the process of thinking it through, I thought, okay, maybe you need to go back to Lagos, right? And, go back to Lagos, but go back and do just exactly what you enjoy doing.
So over these years, you have now figured out.
Yes. That I was good at solicitors work. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed helping clients, solve their problems, think through their business difficulties, find creative ways to, help them move forward, either as startups or fully formed businesses.
It's interesting. So it's also probable that in that time when you were figuring yourself out, you learned a lot of practical things that then help you till today on the legal side of things.
Absolutely. So those years actually helped me to hone my entrepreneurial spirit.
There we go.
So by the time I started Detail and went back to full legal practice, I could think like an entrepreneur because I've been in startup several times, serial startups and serial failures. So I knew I could also tell when a businessman was going to fail, you know, just by having a conversation with him.
Yeah.
You know, and knowing, you know, where this business is headed.
Okay. So 17 years of character building and experience.
I tell you.
Accumulation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, as the founder and lead partner at Detail Solicitors, can you tell us how you came up with the name? The devil is in the detail.
No, yeah, it's very interesting. When I decided I was moving back to Lagos, and I decided that I wanted to start a firm that didn't do litigation, just focused on helping business people be proactive, I started thinking what the name would be, and the firm that I was running in Port Harcourt was my son in Jemide and Associates, but I had this clear vision that, you know, coming to start this new firm in Lagos, I wanted it to be a firm that, as partners came on organically, they could feel that this firm didn't belong to anybody, it belonged to all of us, because it didn't bear anybody's name, right? So I was looking for a generic name that would fit the bill. And the more I looked and thought and wrote and slept and woke up, nothing was coming. So I just stopped thinking about it. And honestly, one day I was driving and I just heard Detail.
So it just came to you?
It just came to me. I parked and I wrote it down and I said, here we are.
Interesting.
And I didn't, honestly, it was later as we started practicing, you know, in Lagos, and, you know, we started expanding our boundaries, that people started saying, there's a lot of attention to detail here. You know, is that why? But it wasn't. It just,
interesting.
It's what it is.
So I guess kind of tied into that, I was going to ask the philosophy of your firm. Is that part of it, attention to detail?
So I mean, I think the first, the first thing is, you know, I kind of decided I wanted to found a firm that focused on keeping business people proactive, right? And did it without conflict. Because I say to clients sometimes when I go and make a pitch, I say, you know, people who offer full service are conflicted. There's no way, a medical doctor who is trying to help you to live right, rather than going to hospital, would be the same doctor who wants you to fall sick and come to hospital, right? There's a conflict there, right? So, so it's important for us to keep our clients proactive, which means avoiding conflict. And in the event that there's conflict, because sometimes you can't avoid it, you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's in such a way that, you know, if the matter gets contentious, some other lawyer on the other side, if they're right thinking, will advise their clients, look, this thing is so clear.
You're protected.
Don't bother going to court. I think we should have a conversation, right? But should they decide to go to court, you know, you're sure that your client will win, all things being equal. I mean, I think the big point there is, you know, there's a kind of conflict between, you know, making money by keeping your client proactive and making money if they get into a dispute. It's a fine line, and you know, if you look at it carefully, there's a conflict. And so Detail is a firm that's trying to avoid that conflict, to want to be just focused, you know, on keeping your client on the proactive side. But knowing that if they get into a dispute, it's your loss, right? And then the other thing is just client care and intimacy, you know. And I say to people that, you know, for litigators who are very active, they barely have time to meet with their clients, at least not in the best hours of the day. Right? You get back sometimes at 2 or whatever. You know, after a hard day in court, you're spent, right? You can't really focus on, you know, trying to solve your clients' naughty issues, right? And it depends. I mean, for someone like me, the morning is the best part of my day, and for most people, right? You know, meeting early in the morning, you can, you know, actually sit down and think things through. So that's 2 things. And the third thing which was important for us, was to build a strong mentoring environment where you can hire people for attitude and then train them for aptitude.
I guess the general ethos then is to be able to serve your client to the best of your ability, I guess, with a view to keeping them out of court drama.
Yes, yes. And making them, focus on growing their business.
Correct. Okay, interesting. You've been doing this for years. You're very sure about this stuff. Was there ever any doubt in your mind along this journey?
Before I started the journey, probably. Like everything, you would wonder, am I doing the right thing? And people said to me, you're actually crazy. That, there's no way you will grow a firm in Nigeria that doesn't provide full service and go to court. What will happen when your clients have disputes? And I said, you go work with litigators. And they said, no, they will steal your clients. And I said, well, if a litigator can steal my client, it means I'm doing a poor job. And I haven't differentiated sufficiently for that client to know what I'm bringing to the table and what the litigators bring to the table. And, so if they would, then I have to go back to the drawing board. Right? So we had that. And in the early days, when things were hard and I was still trying to get clients to trust and believe in me, there were people who said, you are trying to do this, your business model, I have one court case, just take it. And I said, no, right? I'm not doing it, right? So, you had those teething years, and there would be times, when doubt will step in, but you wake up the next morning, powder your face, you wear a good suit, and you move on, right? And I'll tell you, in the early years, I had one lawyer working with me, and she said to me one day when I was, talking about where we were going to as a firm, and she just looked at me, young girl, and she said, you just keep saying these things as if the law firms you met here in Lagos are all asleep. And when she walked out, I brought out my notepad. I always have notepads. I scribbled some things to myself.
Yes.
To encourage myself, right? And over the next 1 week, 2 weeks, I slowly eased her out. I didn't sack her.
Yeah.
I just slowly eased her out until she resigned.
Because the vision was not.
Yes, you don't want to scare people around you.
I mean, from what you just said, it's I guess it's a common thing. Once you are going into uncharted waters, people are going to try to talk you out of it. Whether it's because they don't have the confidence to try to do those sorts of things, or they just can't see the bigger picture.
Absolutely. And when I decided to start Detail, I had a small book of courtroom work, and I had a cut-off date. And by that cut-off date, I wrote to all the clients, and I said, by so and so time, tell me who to transfer your file to. And some of them said, well, why don't you just wait? You have some money to earn when this gets to hearing or when it gets to trial. And I said, no, we have to stop somewhere.
Yeah.
We have to stop somewhere, and we will lose money, but it never ends. And with litigation, you can't predict, right? You think it will get to trial next month, you may be there for another 3 to 4 years, right? So we just had to, shut it down.
So now, we're kind of leaving law, but not leaving law. You have 2 postgraduate certificates in business administration. How do you find that intersects with your practice of law?
Going to business school was one of the best things that happened in my life. And I would recommend it to any commercial lawyer, right? Because it helps you to advise your clients at a higher level. You now understand accounting, you understand where the numbers are coming from, you are more aware of strategy, you're able to understand the language of the business people, and indeed many of them have been to business school. So, as a lawyer, when you go into a room and somebody is telling you, oh, you know, I didn't do this deal because the internal rate of return was low. You're not asking him, oh, was IRR? You understand, right? If you have a client who's trying to buy a business and he says, oh, they're doing a valuation, you can ask him, how they're doing the valuation. Is it discounted cash flow?
Yeah.
You understand? Is it book value, right? And you know, you can understand where those numbers are coming from, right? And it helps you to advise your clients, you know, from a broader perspective, not just from law. So
did these certifications come after you had dabbled into business a bit, or during or before?
So these certifications came after 2005 when I started Detail. Right? So I looked around and I said, you know what, many of the people you are competing with have masters in laws or have doctorate in law, but I didn't want to go in that direction, right? Because you know, I was building a commercial law firm, right, that was catering to business people. And I thought to myself, no, go to business school. It's good on your CV. Even if you didn't learn anything from business school, it's there on your CV that you went to business school. And when someone sees it on your CV, it may open the door and let you in, right? But if you did learn something, when he lets you in, you can then use those skills to add value. And I remember the first week after I got back from business school, I just started, you know, a transaction which was an acquisition, and we were talking about assets. And we sat down in a boardroom, and you know, we had the whiteboard and all that. And I got up and I said, you know, let's even dimension what these assets are for this particular company, which was a manufacturing company at that time. You know, and I started writing on the board, you know, cash in hand, work in progress, which are the things that you are manufacturing, but they're not yet, you know, you haven't finished. Inventory, which is what you have in your stock, you know, and like that. And, you know, and I said, you know, intellectual property, which are your patents, your trademarks, and all that. You know, and so I finished and I listed all of them. Real estate, listed all of them, like 10 different things. You know, and someone in the room said, I thought you said you were a lawyer. And I said, yeah, I'm a lawyer. So, you know, you know, and you know, so when I sat down, I thought to myself, wow, really, this business school is good.
It's worth it.
Yes.
Made you more rounded.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Were there any particular challenges that you faced, probably earlier days more than now, by not doing litigation at all?
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost was the perception, because it was, who does this?
And I almost feel like people tend to take litigators maybe more seriously.
Oh, no. Yeah. People ask me, who does this? Are you okay? You know, nobody does this. You know, you have to be ready to go and fight in court when you're client, when there's a fight. You understand? You have to do everything. You understand? You know, one guy said to me, like, even my client asked me to go and buy him, you know, a dog because he needs an Alsatian. I'm not buying a dog. Anything he says, I should do, right? So you should be ready to do everything, right? You know, can't come and say this is all you do, right? So you dealt with that perception, both from your peers and then even the prospective clients, right? Because many Nigerians and in many parts of the world, people just believe that our lawyers are designed for the day of trouble, right? So sometimes you go introduce yourself and say, oh, I'm a lawyer. I say, okay, I don't have trouble. Right? When I have trouble, I'll call you.
Exactly.
Right? And I say to them, no, don't call me when you have trouble. Call me when you're buying that real estate, or call me when you want to do an M&A, or you know, you want to start a business. That's when you should call me. Why are you waiting to call? You know, so you are constantly dealing with that perception. Both from your peers and from prospective clients.
How many partners are Detail currently?
Right now we're 5.
5, okay.
Yes.
And at the beginning, was it
It
different?
was just me.
It was just you?
Yes, it was me. It was just me. I started in Lagos, 200 square meters of office space in Bull Plaza in Marina. You know, and people came in there and they looked at the 200 square meters and they said, when are you going to fill this place? Because it was just me, you know, 1 youth corper and 1 support staff.
And at what point did you start or did you approach the first person to become a partner? Did you have to convince the person?
My goal was always to grow a firm organically. And I'm just someone who believes that things should grow organically.
Yeah.
Right? And after a year or two in Lagos, a few people came, they approached me and they said, why don't we merge our efforts? So I probably had about 3 to 5 conversations. Not sure if it was something I wanted to do, but somewhere along the line, the conversations either petered out or we both agreed that we couldn't work together. Some I shut down very early, but I was polite enough to have those conversations. And with every conversation, you gain something, right? But I was waiting to grow organically. Difficult route, because sometimes, you train people, they stay with you for 5, 6 years. I've known people who stayed with me 9 years, and just at the cusp, they say they're off to do something else, right? It's what it is.
Indeed. So, in 2013, you were named Best Lawyer in Nigeria by World Finance, I believe.
Yeah.
How did that feel for you? Was it a validation thing? Did it validate all the stuff you had done up until that point? How did you feel about it?
I mean, considering my journey, some of which we've talked about,
yeah.
I mean, it was euphoric because, when you go through what I say is an unusual journey and, pleasant challenge, but touches, right? In many ways, because you are going against the grain, right? So, for me, I think, those accolades just help to make the point that, a lawyer can stay focused and still remain as relevant as the other lawyer who does everything.
You must have been validated.
Yeah.
Okay, now, are you able to share with us any of the, let's say, groundbreaking transactions you have been involved in? Maybe 1, maybe 2, anything?
I can share one with you. I mean, this one is public knowledge, and I think I will share that one because, it's good to mention why it was groundbreaking, right? So a couple of years ago, we were doing a real estate investment trust for UPDC, which is part of the USC group,
okay.
USC Property Development Company. And the way real estate trust is structured is, such that the rules at that time, Securities and Exchange Commission rules, say you have to move the property and the property has to be held by the trustee.
Okay.
Question is, how do you move it? So if you move it by deed of assignment, which means that you have to go to the state government and get governor's consent for that transaction, right? Which means you have to pay stamp duties and consent fees, in Lagos State, where most of the properties were, you're looking at 20-25% of the value of the asset, right? So you're starting a real estate investment trust, the net asset value is already sub 25%. You already spent the 25%, you haven't even started making any money, right? And I said to the client, I said, this doesn't make business sense, right? I mean, good project, but if we don't resolve this issue, right, this might be a transaction waiting to fail. So we thought about it, and we found a creative way to do it, to transfer to the trustee by declaration of trust. It took a while to think about it, and we went back to the client and said, but we have to convince the Securities and Exchange Commission to accept this, because in their minds, it has to be a deed of assignment. I said, but if we do, it will save you X amount. And it was a lot of money in the billions, because it was a 30 billion naira, transaction. And they said, go ahead, and it may take some time because we have to engage them. And they said, go ahead, and before I got home, I said, by the way, if we do, you have to pay us more. You have to give us a bit of course. What we save you. And no problem, write to us. Anyway, long and short was, it took us a while, and we convinced the Securities and Exchange Commission, with some caveats, okay, you must do it like this, you must do it like this. And someone said to me, how did you convince them? I said, before I went to the meeting, I asked myself, what will they want to hear? How is this of benefit to them? And the minute I held on to something, with each meeting, I will start by telling them how it's of benefit for them. In the middle, I will remind them. At the end of the meeting, I'll say it again. And I said to them, you want to grow the market for these kinds of transactions. There's no way you will grow this market with this amount of fees that people have to pay.
Correct. People run away.
So we have to be creative. We have to find a creative way to help you to achieve that objective. And once they saw for themselves that, okay, and at the end of the day, they did it, then they changed the rules to now say, deed of assignment or any other method acceptable to the Securities and Exchange Commission.
And that benefits both sides.
Benefits everybody. Benefited me, SEC, the client.
Was this before 2013? Or when was this?
This was before 2013.
This is probably what added to best lawyer.
Yes.
So another thing you are exceptional at is negotiations. Are there any tips on being a good negotiator? What goes through your mind when you're going into a negotiation? How does that play out for you?
Well, I think, and I wrote a book recently, which is here, right? And if you see, it's titled Listen Everyhow. How negotiations work, right? So the key thing, which I've learned over the years, and I didn't know this, but I just learned it over the years, is it's not the big talkers that come out of the room with the bigger chunk of the pie. It's the big listeners. Because people who keep talking are not aware of what their counterpart is thinking, and they're not seeing, they just enjoy hearing their own voice, right? And I think that's the big lesson. And the question is, how do you listen? And the answer is everyhow. So you're listening with your ears, what people are saying. You are listening with your gut, what they're not saying, and what you think they're actually saying that you haven't yet heard. So people who ask iterative questions, why? Like, why you said it? How? How do you think we're going to get this done? So those questions are important. How? Why? How? When? And just listening.
Yeah.
Right? And you will notice that each time you ask a question and you listen, you gain more insight. Right? And the other person is doing a lot of talking. You are just gaining insight. By the time you decide to say one or two things, you may not need to say more than one or two things.
Yeah.
Because you have enough insight to know exactly where you should be headed, what you should be saying, and what you shouldn't be saying. And one key question I always tell people is, when people ask you, if you are a buyer, for example, and people ask you, why are you buying this? Be careful. It's a slippery slope.
Why do you say so?
Because they are just trying to get into your head to find out what your definition of value is. And in my book, I categorize value in 3 ways. It's intrinsic, it's tangential, or it's emotional. Intrinsic is people who just want to buy something because of the functionality, right? I don't want to buy a house because I just need somewhere to live in, a roof over my head, right? Those kind of people have choice. They're spoiled for choice, right? Because all they want is a roof over their head, right? If somebody is looking out for tangential value, it means in addition to a roof over his head, he probably needs a specific location. Maybe he needs a location next to his child's school so that he doesn't have to commute, right? And then the other person who is buying for emotional value is really emotional value. So if you hear someone say, oh, the reason why I'm buying this house, this is where I grew up, but you don't know this, but this is where I grew up.
Is that highest risk? Emotional?
They will pay more.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The tangential value people will pay slightly less. The intrinsic people, if you call a price that doesn't suit them, they'll tell you bugger off.
Interesting.
Right? So it's in those questions and just listening. So you have to know the right questions to ask. You have to know what you're listening out for. And then issues around personalities. Sometimes people get the best out of negotiation, not because anything changed, but because that man just understood the personality he was dealing with, or the woman understood the personality she was dealing with, and she was able to play on it. Right? So if I come into a place and I realize that esteem is very important to you, you have a huge ego and you like your ego to be massaged. And sometimes it's so easy to spot. If I say to you, oh, Mr. Jack, no, I'm Chief Barrister, Engineer Jack, MMM. Yes, okay.
You just make a mental note.
Sorry, sir. Sorry. Yeah. Right? You make a mental note. Okay. This guy speaks on appellations. You understand? And, and as the days go by, you will keep adding for him. MMM, BSc. Right? Exactly. And you find out that, the person who does that for that particular guy, he will get more out of it. You'll be surprised he will sell to you at a lower price.
Because you have massaged.
Because you've played, but you only get this by listening.
Yeah. So a random question. Yes. The name of the book, is it from your Warri background that you thought of every how?
Again. I knew that it had to have listen, right? And I was trying to make a point. One day I thought to myself, yeah, listen every how. And I Googled it. And it's in the dictionary.
Really?
Yeah. We can try it now.
Interesting.
And the definition is just what it says, right? Listen by every means.
So it seems like you have some sort of gift for naming things. Detail.
I do. I think I do. And I must admit. Yes, I must admit. I mean, recently, I had someone who you typically call your executive assistant or something. And, when she resumed, I said, what shall we call you? She said, personal assistant. I said, no, everybody calls people personal assistant. I hate that. Oh, executive assistant. I said, no, it's too popular. We have to look for a name for you. And I said, go and come up with some other things that are not PA or EA. She came with something that I said, no, these things don't sound right. So 3 days later, I called her one morning and I said, you know what? Your title is the completer. And she said, sir, I love it.
And it's interesting because that would also spur her.
She says, I love it. And I said, you know what it means? Once I start something, your job is to complete it.
I like that.
Yes.
And just again, the premise of this whole listening thing, I think even just on a normal human interaction level, a lot of people talk to respond and talk to win.
Yes.
Not realizing that the winning is in the listening.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to say, but we Nigerians need to learn to listen more, right? And a lot of times people respond to you when you ask a question, and it's obvious they didn't really listen to the question. They already had an answer for whatever you were going to say, right? And people already have preconceived things that they are going to say. Right? So when you're talking, they're just waiting for you to finish so that they can say what they decided that they're going to say anyway, right? And that's why you see a lot of conversations in Nigeria. You know, someone says something, then the third person says, "But that's just what he just said." So really, yeah, but didn't you hear him? That's what he said. You know, you're already arguing, but you're saying the same thing, right? So it's like that.
Is it possible to point to one thing as possibly the highlight of your career so far? It's maybe a transaction or being on the CBN board, anything?
No, and it will definitely not be on the CBN board. CBN board was service to the nation, and it was really service.
Yeah.
But one thing, the highlight of my career, it's difficult. I think some of us just have, you know, a lot of little drops that filled our cup, and you know, as the days go by, you can't find those drops, but you just know that, you know, there were milestones here and there.
Correct.
And things worked incrementally, particularly for people who are very, very gung-ho about building blocks. I've never believed in anything that happens overnight. I'm very suspicious of things that happen overnight, right? So, you know, and I always say to people, you know, success isn't that you've reached your goal, right? Because the reality is your goal always shifts.
Yeah.
If you're true to yourself, your goal always shifts. It should always shift, right? But success is that every day you wake up, every week that passes, every month that passes, you can look back and see that you're making incremental progress.
Absolutely. Can you say, or can you point to a moment that made you realize that this career choice was the best, one of the best decisions of your life?
You know, I started earlier by telling you that, you know, my father is someone that I, you know, grew up having a lot of respect for, including the fact that he could cane very well. I respected his caning skills, right? So, you know, and he's someone who's very, very critical, right? You know, you know, when I first moved into my first house, he came and he looked at me and he says, "When I used to put off the air conditioning when you were young, you thought I was wicked. Where's the AC in your house now?" It's like I'm brutal. You know? Wow. So Ayuli, where's the AC now? You still can't, you know, you moved into a house, I don't see ACs in every room, right? So, I mean, for me, it was a defining moment, you know. One day we're talking on the phone and he says to me, "You've done well, I'm proud of you."
So with the fulfillment and acclaim you have, I guess, achieved over the years, if you could start your career all over again, is there anything you would change?
I would change my approach to one major thing, at least early in the day, you know. And it's one big thing, it's that people don't realize. This world is about people. It's about people. And for many people, when you're much younger, the way you manage people, you know, you could have done it better. So you know, I look back, you know, at many encounters I've had with many people, and you know, maybe 10 years, 20 years ago, you know, and I sit here and I say, what was all that about? Right? And sometimes you're just trying to make a point.
Maybe you weren't listening.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and someone say, no, it's just the principle. Yeah, and you know, but as you get older and wiser, you know that certain things, just let them be, right? You know, and focus on the relationship, and realize that, you know, first and foremost, not everybody's like you, neither you like everybody. Secondly, everybody has their strengths and their weaknesses, right? And even if it happens that somebody's weakness is what you hate most, pick your battles.
Yeah.
Pick your battles, right? So if I had to do it all over again, I would pick my battles in a wiser way. I would build more relationships. I would ensure that I burn less bridges. I would be a better people person overall if I had to do it all over again.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because you see, I was about to say because you seem like a great people person, but
it's grown over the years.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
And today there are things that happen and I just smile. And I said to someone beside me, I said, thank God, 10 years ago, this would have ended differently, right? Or 20 years ago, I would have reacted differently,
Yeah.
right? But but I know that now.
Do you think that 10 years from now, you will possibly look back on today and think, oh, actually, I could have managed that differently?
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, life is incremental. And all things being equal, as the days go by, we should become better people.
For sure.
Right? We should be able to introspect more. We should be more tolerant. We should be more patient. There are people that fired, 20 years ago that if they were here today, they will still be here.
Yeah.
And when I look back, I say, okay, was it that bad? Right? But then you're young.
Yeah.
You're feistier. You are under more pressure.
You're learning.
Yes, and you're still learning, right?
Okay, interesting. So leaving law for a little bit, you own a boat.
Yes.
And you are a captain.
I can drive the boat and dock it.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Does
it have anything to do with your Niger Delta background, water?
It could, because growing up, in Shalcam, we was by the water, and we always had boat trips to some destination or the other. Shell provided a boat for you to go to Forcados, Umutu, these little resort destinations. I've always loved to be on the water, and then privileged to learn how to swim from about age 5, age 6. You just love to. Be on the water or in the water. Yeah.
So is it just a hobby then that you picked up along the way?
No, it's lifestyle. It's lifestyle. There's a slight difference between hobby and lifestyle, right? Lifestyle is deeper. Is lifestyle is just you, right? And it's something that if you're not doing often, you suffer. So it is lifestyle, and for me it's important lifestyle, because everybody has ways of decompressing, and just being on the water with that breeze in your face, and the semi-solitude of it, is a great decompressant for me.
I was going to say that it must be important to you, because it's not a cheap hobby.
No, it's not. But I often say that, the drinks that some people buy at nightclubs in 1 year can buy that boat.
Fair enough.
Or some wristwatches.
Fair enough. So it just depends on
some wristwatches can buy. You notice I'm not wearing a wristwatch.
I noticed.
All the money has gone to the boat.
I also noticed in your office here you have it looks like a samurai sword, or some sort of sword.
Yeah.
Said another. No, this is not lifestyle, child.
No, it's not. It's a gift from a very dear friend.
Okay.
And it's a replica of the Robin Hood sword. And that Robin Hood, traditionally stood for, justice, helping the poor, being out there, helping people. And when he gave this to me, he says, I think you represent, a kind of Robin Hood, and this is an apt gift for you, and it's something that I treasure.
Actually, quite a thoughtful,
yes,
well thought out gift. So in recruiting at your law firm, this is going back to litigation now.
Yes.
Have you observed that young lawyers struggle with litigation, or settling into litigation, or choosing litigation?
Yeah, I mean, young lawyers struggle with everything, and it's understandable. We all struggled, right? And some struggle less with litigation than they struggle with corporate work. I've had to ask someone to leave many years ago, and I advised them to go and try litigation. And this guy took my advice, and I recommended a few firms. He went there and interviewed him, and a year later I saw him somewhere, and he was thanking me profusely, even though it was difficult for him when I said, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to let you go.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes people just need to experience things and then decide what they like, what they enjoy, and where they fit in. Right. So this particular guy, each time we sat in a brainstorm room, he just had a penchant for arguing. And I said, no, we're not arguing. We're trying to reason together and find a solution that works for our client. And that was number one. Number two, he couldn't understand why we were wasting time doing certain things. Right? He would say to me, why are we trying to get the client to avoid paying tax? They should just go and pay the tax. Right? And I said, no, you're adding value. You're not trying to get your client to do anything illegal. They're going to do a transaction, and they will just structure it in such a way that they avoid or reduce the tax implications, right? And this is the value that you bring to the client. And people just gotta pay their tax. That's okay. You know what? So one day I called him, and this guy was a first-class graduate from one of the best universities in Nigeria. So one day I called him and said, I think you should go and try litigation. And he did. And within a year, the firm he went to, one of the top law firms, he was one of their best lawyers. Right? So, and then there are people who go to litigation and they struggle, and then they move to corporate work and they say, oh, I'm home. Right? So it's okay to struggle, but don't stay there. Learn the lessons, and find out why you're struggling. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to move to something else. It could be that your methodology is wrong. It could be that in that specific area you're doing the wrong type. If maybe you're in litigation, you're probably doing the wrong type of litigation, right? So there are people who are very commercially minded, and then you push them into doing chieftaincy litigation, and all they want to do is count, naira and cents, right? But the minute you put them in on a commercial litigation, because they are astute people, they begin to do well, because anything that has to do with money resonates with them, right? They can't understand why people are going to court about some chieftaincy stool, right? But the boss says, this is your file, go and do it, right? So, there's no passion for it.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I guess interest as well plays some sort of role in it. Do you see any other struggles amongst young lawyers today?
I really think that we are doing a great disservice to young lawyers as a profession, right? I asked someone in law school the other day, I said, tell me your curriculum. And it turns out that the curriculum hasn't really changed from when I went to law school. right? That is a fundamental disservice, right? Because the world is moving.
Yeah.
The curriculum has to move alongside. And if you notice, great universities offer certain courses today that 20 years ago you would never have thought that, you know, people will curate a course on a particular subject matter, right? But 20 years ago it wasn't relevant, it wasn't on the table, right? And the kind of degrees that people are coming out of university with, you know, from good universities, you know, you can see that people are spending time to think about employability skills, you know, about where the world is headed and the kind of knowledge that people should have, right? And when you think about the law school today, right, it's more about the academics, whereas the employer of labor is no longer looking deeply at your academics. They're looking at your proficiencies and your aptitudes. And we are not taking care of those proficiencies and aptitudes, right? So they will struggle. So they come into firms, and if they're not privileged to come into a mentoring environment where people understand that, you know, these people are just plain vanilla, you have to help them.
Yes.
Right? They will continue to struggle. And eventually they will get frustrated, go do something else, or try set up on their own, but it's not going to solve it.
I almost feel like it even cuts across the whole education system.
I totally agree with you. I can speak for law because I'm constantly asking, right? Constantly asking.
I think that is a good segue into my next question, which is, what is your vision for legal practice in Nigeria, the legal profession?
I think we have to overhaul the entire profession, right? And it's difficult to tell you, but I can mention a few things, right? But I think the entire profession needs to be overhauled. Right? To start with, I think that the profession is so skewed to courtroom. All the trappings. You go to law school, the internship, you come back, you fill a form, all the details they want in the form for your law firm internship, majority of it is courtroom, right? I'm unable to take law school interns here.
Because you don't...
Because I say to them, there are things that you will need to fill in your form. You won't get them here. Right? We don't go to court. So how you know, don't come here. You will fail.
Yeah.
Right? Are we a bad environment for an intern to come to? Absolutely not. Right? But that's just the way it's structured. The reward system. Right? There are great lawyers in this country who don't go to court, but they've contributed more to the GDP and the economy of this country. Where's the reward for other people who don't do courtroom, right? And you can't become a senior advocate of Nigeria because the laundry list of things you have to achieve, if you're not a courtroom lawyer, you never achieve them unless you go and buy cases and, you know, go to court of appeal, you know, and even the judges ask you, what are you doing here? And he says, sir, you know, I just want to be a son, right? So you have to have a reward system that makes people feel that if they don't follow the path of being a litigator, you know, the system can also reward them, you know, and recognize them. And many of the people who have, you know, followed the path of non-courtroom, you know, definitely they've created institutions, they've contributed to this economy in no small way, right? I mean, every transaction they do, you know, brings in a lot of dollars and euros and pounds into our economy. It's people who sit down and find ways to structure things, you know, that, you know, bring in the MTNs of this world into the country, create employment, and, you know, help us to use our mobile phone as we do today, right? So that for me is something that needs to be looked at.
Okay, do you have or have you harbored any ambitions to become a senior advocate of Nigeria? Do you feel like you're missing out on anything by not currently being a senior advocate?
No. And you know, once in a while I've just thought about it, but just to make a point that perhaps I can be if I wrote a few more books and all that. But then, you know, on second thought, I didn't think to myself, you're a non-courtroom lawyer, what do you want to do with senior advocate of Nigeria? The two don't go together, right? Exactly. You don't want to say this is who you are and then you're looking for appellations that dilute who you are.
Makes sense.
It's a wrong approach.
Speaking of books,
yes.
Just to go back to that, do you have any plans to write any more books? Should we be expecting?
Yes, you should be expecting. I'm at that stage in my life where I'll be writing more books.
Okay.
I'll be writing more books.
Okay.
I've actually conceived of the next one.
Okay.
And started putting my thoughts together.
Interesting. Is it a secret?
Don't ask me.
Had to try.
No.
Seeing as the Nigerian system is basically modeled on the UK system, do you think it's time that we separate barristers and solicitors like the way it is in England?
I'm not sure it's a good way to go. I don't think the market is deep enough. Let's be honest. I don't think the market is deep enough in Nigeria for that. I mean, I think it's okay for us to stay as legal practitioners. But, you know, should someone decide that in being a legal practitioner, this is what they do, this is what they don't do, you know, we should be able to respect it and create a system that accommodates everybody.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
We have more or less come to the end of this interview. Thank you very much for taking the time out and taking us on a journey through your journey.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And there you have it. I, for one, enjoyed that session. I learned a lot about the journey of the man, who he was, who he is, and who he might become. And I hope there were a lot of young lawyers, new lawyers watching this, because it was a lesson in life. You will have doubts, you will face challenges, but if you have unwavering conviction about where you are headed, the sky is your limit. Thank you.
I'm a big wig. Yeah. I need to run things up. Yeah. We're making great moves, big moves. Yeah. Pam. I'm a lawyer. I love the practice. So my daily moves, nothing but magic. I'm a lawyer, but I don't even go to court. My daily moves, nothing but magic, nothing but magic. Listen, a lawyer can be creative, it can even make you a native. A lawyer can rap or sing. In fact, a lawyer can do anything.